Hey again, everybody. It's your old pal Guardian Enzo coming to you live on tape from Kyoto with the Fall 2021 season preview video. And this is my third YouTube video companion for the LIA season preview post. How many of those I've done at this point? Geez, I don't even want to think about that. It's been 10 years plus, so it's been a few. So yes, it's fall. And as veteran anime viewers will know, fall and spring tend to be the two biggest anime seasons of any given year. Spring of this year was easily the best of the first three seasons, so that pattern did hold true. Fall, it did not look great going in. There was one show which kind of towered over everything else on the preview for me, and then late in the game. So late in the game, in fact, that it came after I had already written my draft for the post on the website. We got an announcement that kind of turned the whole season upside down for me. It'll probably be off the radar for a lot of anime fans, but for me, it's a pretty big deal. We'll talk about that show in a minute. The other show is Blue Period, by the way. That was the one that really kind of towered over everything. So it's kind of funny as I look at this season, which is about 50 shows, which is in the modern context a pretty average size for a fall season. As usual, about a third of them made my preview cut. It seems to follow that pattern almost every season. It's give or take a show or two. It's right at 1/3. What struck me in looking at this season is normally the biggest category would be, or at least the most important probably, is mid-table, because those are the ones that they make up the bulk of the schedule, and a lot of what I'm going to end up covering comes from that shelf. Nothing, I've had seasons like this past summer where nothing came in the highest expectations category, and I've got a couple shows there this season, but the mid-table category is only 3 shows, which is really, really small. So there's a lot of series that are just kind of hanging in there that I'm kind of giving a flyer to, which makes me very nervous going into the season. We'll see. We've also had the concern with, in addition to the ongoing industry concerns, the MAPPA syndrome, I guess you could call it, although it really afflicts all studios, but MAPPA is just the most egregious example. But also the COVID pandemic continues apace in Japan, and we've had some delays and cancellations. If you follow the news, a lot of seiyuu have come down publicly as having been diagnosed with COVID. So yeah, that's something that could rear its ugly head again as well. But for now, we have, like I say, about 50 shows on the schedule. I'm previewing about a third of them. As usual, my written preview will be the more comprehensive in terms of breadth. I'm going to use the video companion to talk more in detail about a few shows rather than just give you a little blurb on every one. You can read those. I'm going to talk about the ones that kind of really light my fire, if you will, or at least spark some interest, if not light my fire. And the top category, as always, on my season preview posts is highest expectations. And as I said, this past summer I had no shows fall in that category, which is pretty rare. In fact, I had, and when I did my season check-in, I had no shows that ended up in the top 2 categories, which is really something unusual. I ended up with a couple good shows this season, but summer did end up, as it looked like it would be, pretty weak. Fall has Blue Period. Blue Period is based on a seinen manga, and it's frankly one of the most rewarded and one of the most respected seinen manga out there. You won't find too many folks who don't like Blue Period. It's been around now for about 4 years or so. The name of the mangaka is Yamaguchi Tsubasa. And it's the story of a young high school student, a second-year student named Yaguchi, who's kind of normal but kind of bored with life and not really feeling fulfilled, as adolescents will sometimes be, and adults too for that matter. And he ends up discovering the world of art. And that is where things kind of take off from there. And it's a chronicle of a young person discovering his artistic self and people he meets, both other students and adult mentors. It's really, I haven't read a ton of the manga. I've read just enough to kind of whet my appetite, and blue is kind of the key. There's a lot of blue out there. We have a lot of blue manga. We have Blue Lock, we have Aoashi, we have B Blues, we have Blue Period. There's a lot of them. A couple of those have anime coming, and this particular blue box. Oh, can't forget Blue Box. Hope we get an anime for that. This is just a kind of a can't miss, really. I mean, there's no such thing as a can't miss when you adapt a manga. We don't know how long the series is going to be. Could it be one core? Could it be two core? We don't know. The manga, as I said, is ongoing. So there's potential issues there, but honestly, the manga is so good that the anime would really, really have to screw things up royally in order for this not to be, until about a week ago, I would have said for this not to be the best show of the season. Now I'll say for it not to be a great show because there's another contender. But we have a director named Masanori Koji, who is a solid veteran director who's been around for a good long time. Should be, this is a sort of series that I don't necessarily think needs a great director. He's best known to me as the director of Kimetsu, which is, I think, a very, very underrated series from the decade of the 2000s. And he's done a bunch of other stuff since then. A good director, Rod the TV, Read or Die. It's just some good stuff. And did the Welcome to the Space Show movie as well, which was pretty good. I would have loved to have seen Blue Period in the hands of a truly auteur great director, but it's okay. He's fine, and I don't think it needs anyone spectacular in order for it to succeed. It also has Yoshida Reiko, who is a name we'll be talking about again shortly, as doing the series composition. So she's a extremely experienced veteran adapter who's very, very good, who's done a lot of very literate series. So this one is in good hands. It's certainly my top pick for the season, and I expect it to be excellent. The one series that complicated things, that completely shook up spring for me, is Heike Monogatari. Where do I begin with Heike Monogatari? Some time ago, about a year maybe, I sent out some tweets. I said, it's really weird. Heike Monogatari is a fantastic. It's my favorite of all the Japanese classics. It's extremely well known here. It's taught in schools. It's a very important Japanese literate work, and yet it has never really received, much less an anime adaptation, it's never even really received a proper full-length manga adaptation. So I just mused on why that was, and then lo and behold, here we get an announcement of, at the beginning of September, basically, that Science Saru, the studio that was founded by Yuasa Masaki, is doing an anime adaptation of Heike Monogatari. And I was pretty gobsmacked to hear that. In fact, they're also doing an adaptation of Inu-O, which is a novel based on Heike Monogatari, and Yuasa himself is directing the movie. And both the movie and the TV series are by a man named, based on a translation of the Heike Monogatari by a man named Furukawa Hideo, who was the first to translate the series into modern Japanese language. And also, as I said, he wrote this side story, Inu-O, which Yuasa is making into a film as a sort of companion piece to the TV series, or I guess maybe more properly we could say the TV series is a companion piece to the film, however you want to look at it. In any event, it's a pretty fascinating prospect, to say the least. As someone who's an absolute devotee of the source material, I love Heike Monogatari. It's a chronicle of the Genpei War, which is the civil war in the 12th century between the Taira clan and the Minamoto clan. And Heike is actually another kanji reading for Taira. And to say that this story is deeply imprinted in Japanese culture is an understatement. To this day, it's stuff like there's two kinds of fireflies, and they call them the Taira and the Minamoto. So I mean, there's big fireflies. Actually, they call them the Genji and the Heike, which is the alternative readings. And um, it's a tragedy. But it's what I love about Heike Monogatari is the genesis of the actual story is that they were parables that were told by the biwa hoshi, who were blind monks, usually blind monks, who told these to the accompaniment of the biwa, which is a stringed instrument. And these were passed down over many, many years. And then in the 14th century, they were finally compiled in written form. And it's the story of the Taira clan and the Minamoto clan, and it's the story of the build up to the Genpei War, the war itself, and most poignantly for me, the stuff that comes after the Genpei War. And it's just wonderful. It's a wonderful story with more pathos than it knows what to do with. My concern here is that it looks to me, judging by the promotional material, including the preview video, that the Science Saru version of Heike Monogatari is a quite liberal adaptation with an original character who is a young girl who's one of the biwa hoshi, which is fictitious in and of itself, in that they were all men. And there's some kind of a magical element to it, I think, that is being tied in. It's kind of hard to tell, but it's pretty clear that this is not a literal adaptation. It's a loose adaptation. And for the record, this thing could be great. It has, it has the director, and this is another big story, is Yamada Naoko. And the big story there is she's a legend from Kyoto Animation. And her leaving that studio to direct at Science Saru is a big deal, especially for KyoAni fans. But KyoAni is not like most anime studios in that most people don't leave. They train their animators. They have a good training program. They pay better than most. They generally use employees rather than contractors. So for someone, a big name to leave, it does happen. It's happened over the years many times, but especially in the aftermath of the horrible tragedy from the arson attack, for someone like her to leave, for someone like Yamada to leave, it's a big deal. She's a great talent. She could do wonderful things with this story. For me, the challenge is going to be trying to divorce my tremendous feelings of attachment for the source material to what may in fact be a very loose adaptation. And I'm going to try to be as impartial as I can possibly be. And I hope this is wonderful. For me, I see a huge gap here between the potential upside and the potential downside, and we just don't know. But it's an amazing, amazing source material that's long, long overdue for an anime. And it has a very strong staff. And I'm going to hope for the best. And really, what can you do besides hope for the best in a case like this? But if this is great, I mean, sure, on paper, this could be a classic. I mean, I think the upside is basically limitless with this based on how good the source material is. As far as Science Saru is concerned, I mean, obviously with Yuasa's attachment, and they have a whole of Yuasa's team is a wonderful team. There's been some controversy there with the working conditions, which were originally, they were bragging on how they were going to be better than other anime studios. They took on a lot of work, and one animator went public with their concerns about it, and then the studio basically told him, shut your mouth or we're going to sue you. It got very ugly. I don't know how to feel about Science Saru at this point, but with Yamada and Reiko Yoshida, who's doing the writing attached, you would certainly hope this thing is going to be great. And like I say, the challenge for me is going to be to divorce my subjective feelings about the source material and try to look at this less as an adaptation and more as an inspired by type of series, and not be hung up on the fact that after all these years we still don't have a proper adaptation, and what an injustice that is. So those two series really are the ones that tower over everything for me. In the mid-table category, as I noted, it's very small this season. We have only 3 shows in there. One of them is Komi-san wa Comyushou desu. Komi Can't Communicate, a very, very popular manga, which I have not read any part of, to be honest with you, although I've heard good things about it, and it's always gotten a lot of fan awards and bookseller awards. It's immensely popular, no question about it. And it should be it should be good. This is the story of a beautiful, tall girl who should be super popular and should be a school idol, but she's actually extraordinarily afflicted by social anxiety, and she kind of ends up fate being thrown together with her name is Komi, obviously, and a guy named Tadano Hitohito, who's sort of, from what I can tell, the stereotypical average high school dork who ends up sort of getting paired off by fate with her, and the two of them become friends, and he sort of tries to help her get over her affliction or her difficulty, shall we say. So I don't know what to make of this. I suspect it'll be really good. As I said, the manga is extraordinarily well liked. So I mean, you're not really expecting anything but a good series here. I have heard that the other characters, particularly the male lead, are very bland. That is a bit of a concern for me. We'll see. I don't really know. The one thing that elevates this series in my esteem is that the supervising director is Watanabe Ayumu, who should need no introduction to serious anime fans out there. He's a tremendous director. He's branched and done a lot of theatrical stuff lately, but cut his teeth doing a lot of TV anime, and has done some of my favorite series like Uchu Kyodai and Major Second and Nazo no Kanojo X and Koi no wa Amiagari. The list goes on and on. The guy is a phenomenal director. And so with him attached, you would think Komi-san, if it needed a boost, it's gotten one. So that one is pretty highly regarded by me. Next, we have Ousama Ranking by Wit, which is based on a manga whose covers I used to see in the bookstores a lot and think, oh, this looks very interesting. It looks quirky. It looks different. But it was never translated. It's been unofficially translated the first few chapters now, and I checked them out, and they're very, very charming. It's the story of a little boy who's a prince, who's theoretically first in line to the throne of his fantastical kingdom, but he's deaf and he's generally looked down upon by everyone in the court, and even secretly laughed at by the public. And he makes friends with a very interesting creature, and it's a very, very weird and quirky and bittersweet story from what I can tell. I'm quite intrigued by this, actually. The fact is, it's Studio Wit, which is very interesting, and I love the fact that Wit dropped something like Attack on Titan so they would have more time to do shows like Ousama Ranking, and I suspect there's going to be a lot of people who are going to feel pissed about that, especially if Wit is off the second season of Vinland Saga, which is strongly rumored to be the case. But Wit, I like the fact that Wit does idiosyncratic and unusual stuff, and they are one of the most interesting studios in anime, and they do seem to have a genuine interest in doing interesting and different and intellectually ambitious work. And I don't call this a sleeper because the manga is known to me and because it is Wit, but I do think there's some upside with this. I'm very, very curious to see if anybody watches this, if anybody pays any attention to it, but I certainly will. So that's Ousama Ranking. And then we have Taishou Otome Otogibanashi, which initially, frankly, appealed to me because there's a sort of a visual overlap with Ikoku Miro no Kwase, which was my top series of 2011, which was the first full year I was blogging anime, and remains a series I dearly love. Although, other than the fact that it's an older guy who's a bit socially awkward and a young girl who end up being thrown together and having a relationship, there's not much combining the two. There's not much tying the two together other than that. But again, this is a story that has a pretty darn good reputation. It seems to be the manga is very well regarded, and the deal here is that the guy is he's the heir to not a lordship or anything like that, but his father is a very wealthy businessman, and he's supposed to inherit, but he ends up being in an accident, and his mother is killed, and he loses an arm, and he sort of gets into a depression, and he gets sent away in semi-exile by his father. And the young girl is the one that the father sends out to him to be betrothed to him. So, I mean, that all looks quite interesting. It does not have a huge big name staff attached to it. Not a huge big name studio in Synergy SP, but could be good. I have a little concern here, if anything, that this has a bit of a scent of that healing vibe to it, and some of those so-called healing shows can be a little bit self-aware and insufferable to me, but I have a fair amount of interest in this, not as much as probably Komi-san or Ousama Ranking, but it's definitely above the other shows on the list, which is why it goes in the mid-tier category for me rather than the modestly interested. So modestly interested, this season is where the bulk of everything is. It's 2/3 of the shows fall in that category, and there's not a lot in this category, honestly, this time around that stands out for me as something that has a huge amount of potential, but sometimes those shows will pop up and surprise you. The one show maybe that I feel has a sleeper vibe, there's a couple, maybe Senpai ga Uzai Kouhai no Hanashi, which is a story about a small woman who's much bigger senpai at work, likes to tease her, and of course there are reasons behind that, as we will find out. It looks interesting. It looks fun to me. Some of these type of series can be pretty insufferable, but I have a good feeling about this one, and I can't even 100% say why. I just kind of have a feeling it's going to be pretty good. The one thing that concerns me is that the chapters in the manga on this are very, very short, and sometimes those are the sorts of series like gag manga types, though I don't think this is literally considered a gag manga, that can be tough to adapt into full-length anime, so we'll see how they do with that. But that, among the modestly interested shows, among that big pool of shows, is probably the one that I have the most interest in for this season. After that, Platinum End is interesting, mainly because it's Ashirogi Muto. It's Obata Takeshi and Oba Tsugumi, Bakuman and Death Note, etc., etc. But I read the manga, and honestly, it's not anywhere near their best work. The reason I kind of have some hopes for this is the first part of the manga is the best part, so at least we'll get to that. Also, they're going to presumably adapt the whole thing because it's finished, which is 14 volumes and 24 episodes, which means they're going to have to do some cutting. And frankly, this is a series that could use some cutting. And also, Miu Irino is playing the male lead, and Miu Irino, who just got married, by the way, so congratulations, Miu. He's among my favorite seiyuu of all time, and he doesn't do a lot of lead roles these days, so I'm very, very happy to see that. So I'm hopeful that Platinum End will be a better anime than it was in manga. But even so, it could be a better anime than it was in manga and still not be great. So modest expectations for me. There's a couple of horror comedies, Mieruko-chan and Kyuuketsuki Sugu Shinu. One of them is about a girl who sees ghosts and gruesome things. The other one is about a vampire who turns to dust whenever he gets startled. Who knows what's going to go that. That one, the vampire one, is directed by Hiroshi Kojima, who directed Hunter x Hunter, Hunter x Hunter 2011 over at Madhouse, which, that's interesting to see him doing this. And then there's actually another ghost series, which is Sankaku Mado no Sotogawa wa Yoru, which is, again, a story about a guy who sees ghosts. This time it's a guy, and he teams up with a psychic, and they sort of do an odd couple Ghostbuster kind of a thing, detective stuff. And this is officially labeled as Shonen Ai, which is a demographic or a genre tag you don't see much these days. So that, who knows? And then one that I sort of have a semi-sleeper vibe to is Muteking, the Dancing Hero, which is primarily here. Well, it's interesting to me because Tatsunoko is producing it, and they're one of the all-time old-school anime studios there ever was. But this one is interesting because it's weird. It's a remake of a 1980 series about a kid who fights crime via dancing. And it's set in San Francisco in the 1980s. Okay, that's unusual for anime. It's a remake of a 41-year-old series. And interestingly enough, one of the people who worked on that series 41 years ago, Sasagawa Hiroshi, is one of the co-directors of this series now. He's 85. And then there's a 78-year-old director named Ryosuke Takahashi, who's also a co-director. So it's interesting, a weird oddball for a lot of reasons. No idea whether it's going to be any good, but it definitely stands out as the sore thumb this time around. It doesn't look like anything else on the schedule. Sometimes those shows will surprise you. And, dancing, unusual, weird dancing anime put me in mind of Tribe Called Crew, which was a series Sunrise did a few years ago, which I really thought was underrated and a lot of fun. So we'll see. And after that, really, that's about all from that modestly interested category that I even want to talk about. There's other shows on there, but none of them really, I'll watch them all. I'll watch all the premieres. I'll probably do first impressions on almost all of them. Maybe a couple of them will surprise me. In fact, a couple of shows that I don't even preview in my season preview post will probably surprise me. It usually happens. So we'll see. And then we have the OVA category, which, as regular followers of the blog and indeed of anime will know, has been pretty much on the decline for a long time. OVA, there's not much original about original video animation anymore. It's a line I've used before. They're pretty much just special episodes of TV anime almost all the time. The days when OVA were represented by the likes of Fooly Cooly are long gone. The only OVA on this list really this season that I'm even going to follow at all is the Given OVA, Uragawa no Sonzai. And Given was a series I liked a lot. I remember it more for being ultimately disappointed in it than how much I liked it, but I did like it. So I'll watch this. I'll probably watch the movie first, the theatrical film, which I admit I still have not seen. So that's one I really have to check off the list first, but I will watch that OVA. And then the only movie, summer is usually the big season for movies. Fall is often not as big. Indeed, there's not a lot on the theatrical list this season that I find particularly riveting. The one movie I'll be following is probably the new Eureka 7 movie, High Evolution 3. But I have not been a big fan of these reboot films for E7, so I suspect that's not going to change with this one. Nevertheless, I'll give it a watch. And that is Fall 21. Hopefully, knock wood, hopefully everything on this schedule will actually get produced and we won't have any delays due to the pandemic. I'm not totally optimistic that will happen, but I'm hopeful. And then again, Blue Period is the headliner. That's the sure thing. But Heike Monogatari is the wild card of wild cards for me, with a limitless potential for upside and downside. And I'm going to be watching that with a great deal of interest. So look forward to an interesting season. It was certainly transformed by the announcement of Heike Monogatari, which will be premiering early, by the way, September 15th. It may even premiere before this post and video hits. So keep an eye on that. The one other thing I should note about that is it's going to be streaming before it actually shows on Japanese television, which is kind of interesting, including in the West, where it'll be streaming via Funimation. So I hope you enjoyed this. As always, I will link to the actual preview post in the description below. And I hope, I hope these previews are some use to you. Please leave any comments below or over on LAA if you care to. I'm always interested in hearing what you have to say. And I'm going to have, as usual, I'll have a season preview poll on the website, a most anticipated series. So I would love it if you'd vote on that. And needless to say, like and subscribe and comment, all the above, all of the below. As always, my sincere thanks for tuning in. My sincere thanks for reading. And I hope everyone is staying safe. And I hope you have a great fall. Stay frosty.